Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much, moderator, for allowing us to share our experiences on a very important subject matter that we are about. As we all know that water is life. Part of what this Helpdesk intends to do, as mentioned earlier, it is expected to share those experiences. What each country is doing legislatively, insofar as realizing the fact that indeed water is life. I must say from the onset that with this in mind, coming from South Africa, we drink from the tap. Let me emphasize, we drink from the tap. It's taken for granted. I'm very much conscious of that fact, because here in Korea, you have to get a warning that says you do not drink from the tap. In the US, in Europe, and elsewhere in the world, you have a number of those instances where you are told and warned that you do not drink from the tap. Now, in South Africa, something that we'll also have to share and advance to the whole world, that water be made a constitutional right matter. Precisely because it is, water is life. We have such, to an extent that you are dealing with these instances. When you are going to hear of all sorts of challenges related to electricity, among others, you have alternatives. You're talking about renewable energies and so on and so forth. But insofar as water is concerned, we do not have alternatives. If there is no water, there is no water. What we are going through in South Africa today, we are going through a process of transition. We are a 20-year young democracy. Having taken access to water at the time, 1994, the democratic government came into place. At the time, it was 30% access to water. As we speak today, we are in the region of 90% access to water. Of course, what is equally very critical in this whole process, because you have, as you continue making water accessible and also equitably distributed, you also are to deal with matters related to pollution. You are also having some of our individuals and groups and collectives in South Africa that have water rights over a set period of time. Now that is also going to be underpinned as we speak now through policies such as polluter pays. For those of us who pollute water, they must take full responsibility of paying for that pollution. Secondly, those that have water, they must use that water right. If you do not use, you lose those rights. There are 4 clusters that in South Africa water is to be found at. There's a cluster that relates to social, that talks about as to how socially water is to be distributed and how generally water is made use of socially in our country. Having to have access to usage in terms of drinking. When you wake up, you have got to wash and brush your teeth, and you've got to take a bath, and those related. Economically speaking, Coca-Cola, Nestle, the mining industry, agriculture depends on water. More and more we are informed that the next wars in the world are going to be around water. Security, therefore, becomes one of those other clusters as to how we manage that water resource worldwide. Rivers they cut across countries. So therefore, that management becomes quite critical. And lastly, point being made about governance as to how you really manage in those countries, whether across levels of government, local to national, how you manage that water becomes equally quite critical. Having said all of this, without that maintenance budget built into our own national budgets, certainly we are not going to be able to go anywhere. Otherwise, it becomes quite expensive to replace that infrastructure that talks to water if you do not manage it over time. We are informed in Japan that your infrastructure that you have there dates back some 100-odd years or so ago. In the world, you have all of those targets that relate to Millennium Development Goals and now post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals. Water, therefore, features quite prominently in one of those. But that must not only end there. It must cascade down to country development agendas. That's why in South Africa, through our National Development Plan, Vision 2030, we do have there a subject, or rather a portion that deals with water, as to how socially and economically it is going to assist towards establishing, or rather realizing, that Vision 2030. That Vision 2030 seeks to talk about having to make sure that poverty levels are reduced tremendously, inequalities in our country, and also unemployment is reduced to a bare minimum. We do have those international protocols that are there as countries we are party to. I would imagine such a help desk will also have to assist us in really getting to say and see as to how we relate with those international protocols, and as to how we equally participate in realizing those international protocols in our respective countries. The last point, again, as I said earlier on, water is life, and sanitation is dignity. I thank you very much.